Hello, I'm meteorologist Rob Carlmark here with the weather for Northern California and part of the West Coast, and it has been a very busy time for rain and for snow. And the snow part has really been beneficial because we've been lacking for snow and snowpack and everything else. Also, the resorts needed a little bit more snow, but we sort of hit the breaking point over the weekend with too much rain and too much snow, some localized flooding issues. And for the snow, long-standing chain control areas and even closed roads for hours and hours and hours just because of spinouts and unsafe conditions. So let's look at the positive here. What we've racked up since October 1st, which is the beginning of our rainy season, 20 inches of rain since October 1st for Eureka, about the same for Santa Barbara, which is very impressive. The theme here is that if you don't know what these numbers mean in relation to where they typically are, if you're in the blue, that means you're above average. And for so many locations, northern, central, southern California, we're many inches above average. So we're in good shape. And even for the snow, we've made up a lot of ground for our below average snowpack, which was the case just last week, after this weekend, and certainly after today as well. I think we're going to be in much, much better shape. So this is how it looked earlier on Monday. You could see the brunt of the storm still pushing through, valley rain, Sierra snow, then one last final push into the evening. And then behind that, some colder air and then also some stability. So we're going to return to more dry conditions and more settled conditions, which is good. We've got to dig out for the winter storm and also for the valley areas. High river levels and creek levels need to start to come down. What you need is a nice gap in the rain and snow, and that's exactly what we're going to have. Winter storm conditions until at least 4 p.m. for some locations and 10 p.m. for others in the central Sierra, but we're going to get there. So here's a look at our Monday. Far northern California, a mix of rain and snow depending on your elevation. Snow's about 5,000 feet. More valley rain, more Sierra snow through Monday. Into the evening, we've got one final push that should make it through Monday and very early on Tuesday. And then by Tuesday morning and beyond, we should be in good shape. There's a couple systems that sort of clip the Sierra with lingering light rain and snow in the middle of the week, but that's really just one spot and one moment in time. The rest of the time after that is going to be a drying out period for the most part. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our Monday temperatures and, of course, the region. For the valley spots, you're going to be somewhere in the 50s later today, the 40s for the foothills and the 30s up high. Again, that snow level's right around 5,000 feet. So that's going to bring places like Truckee, South Lake Tahoe, other communities, even on the western slope, in for some light snow, at least through Monday. And then that snow level is going to start to drop, actually, because we're going to get colder, but we're out of moisture. We're just out of gas to feed the system. So widespread, I would say, cold temperatures to kind of cold temperatures right in the middle of the valley. Plan for rain is for all day long because, like I mentioned, we're looking at 2 waves of this before everything settles out, highs in the 50s. After the stability moves in, our temperatures are actually going to be on the way down. We're going to be colder later this week. There's that one midweek blip for the Sierra, the mountains, and also the foothills with some light rain and some light snow, mostly in the evening. Then we are clear not only Thursday, Friday, but through this upcoming weekend. So there we go, folks. Over the next many days, we're going to end up with conditions that are going to be just fine. Just one more weather impact alert day on your Monday.
Hey, I'm meteorologist Brendan Minchef, and we're going to talk about what an atmospheric river is. It's a term you may have heard, you may not be familiar with it, but you may have heard the term Pineapple Express. Not every atmospheric river is a Pineapple Express. However, as we will learn, every Pineapple Express is a type of atmospheric river. So as we look at the map, these are most common along the U.S. West Coast, especially in the wintertime. However, other parts of the United States, including the Gulf Coast and the Northeast, can see atmospheric rivers. In the Gulf of Mexico can act as that moisture source for atmospheric rivers moving up through the southeast and into the northeast. And sometimes you can get a nor'easter that can be attached to an atmospheric river. But let's jump into it. Let's look at the map. Well, when high pressure is sitting off the west coast, what that does is it kind of, for the most part, blocks the moisture from coming in. When high pressure slides a little bit further to the south, and especially when it's coupled with a storm passing through either British Columbia or the Pacific Northwest or even Northern California, what can happen is it can tap in to this atmospheric river. And what that is, it's a narrow band of moisture, about 1,000 miles long or so, and it can pull in a lot of tropical moisture into an area. For instance, this textbook example is showing it impacting California. And when that happens, it can bring a lot of rain. And if it's cold enough or your mountains are high enough, it can bring a lot of snow with it. This type of setup here, where it originates near Hawaii, is a pineapple express. Here's some more facts about an atmospheric rivers. Atmospheric rivers carry 7.5 to 15 times the flow of the mouth of the Mississippi River. They vary. Some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker, but they are very, very wet systems, and that's why we get a lot of rain from these. And atmospheric river events are responsible for the majority of the water supply on the U.S. West Coast. Here is a satellite image of an atmospheric river. Again, this is a type of atmospheric river that we might call a pineapple express. It originates near Hawaii. High pressure sits here, and so it brings this moisture, for instance, here into California. But if your high pressure is a little bit further north, it can bring that moisture up into the Pacific Northwest. Again, this setup here is a pineapple express. So to be clear, a pineapple express is an atmospheric river that pulls moisture from Hawaii. But not every atmospheric river is a pineapple express. This one here, here's another example. You see the atmospheric river extending out from Hawaii, but that moisture is being pushed into the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia. So every pineapple express is an atmospheric river, but not every atmospheric river is a pineapple express. And we rank atmospheric rivers based on two things: by the amount of water in them and how long that atmospheric river is going to last. So a weak or level 1 atmospheric river is primarily beneficial, not a lot of flood risk, relatively the same for a level 2 moderate atmospheric river. By the time we start talking about a level 3, AR3 on the scale here, that's a stronger atmospheric river. It's both equal parts beneficial and hazardous, but as soon as you start working your way up in strength to category AR category 4, AR category 5 on the scale, well, that means now we're talking about atmospheric rivers that are mostly hazardous or primarily hazardous, meaning they have so much moisture and they're going to last for so long that the flood risk is much higher.
I'm meteorologist Caitlin McGrath, and I want to take a few minutes and talk about some of the winter weather you'll hear making headlines here over the cold winter months, starting with Arctic blasts that come from the polar vortex. So let's start with the basics. What the polar vortex is. It's an area of low pressure and cold air that surrounds it that sits at both the north and the South Pole. When we have a strong polar vortex, we have a really tight jet stream that keeps that cold air trapped in place at the poles. But sometimes the jet stream weakens and that polar vortex, that Arctic air, can sink south. Sometimes it can go as far south in the United States as parts of Texas and the southeast. But most often you'll kind of hear about these Arctic blasts through parts of the Midwest, the Great Plains, and the Northeast. Now you'll also hear us talking about Alberta clippers, and they get their names because oftentimes these weak little winter systems form in Canada, right around the region of Alberta, and they just kind of clip parts of the United States. This is the typical path that they may take as they move through the Great Plains into the Midwest, across parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and into the Northeast. They are fast moving and they oftentimes lack moisture. These are not your big blizzards, they're not big nor'easters, but they typically are enough to bring just a little bit of light snow, and oftentimes what moves in behind a clipper is really cold air and blustery wind. Just two types of weather phenomenon that you'll hear about here as we head through the next several months.